This is Actualize Freedom, straight talk on growing clicks and conversions on Amazon FBA from people doing it every day. Now here's your host, digital marketing acrobat, Danny Kenji Carlson.
What's up, guys? Danny Carlson here, and we have a really interesting episode here today with someone a little bit different than a typical guest, and his name is Ryan Cropper. He has a YouTube channel of nearly 200,000 subscribers talking about just things that are really beneficial, not just for business, not just for really achieving more of what you want in your life, but just being like a happier person in general, and like understanding who you are more, what you like, how to navigate your emotions, very useful things like that. And while we're probably going to go a little bit towards the deep end of like quote unquote woo woo stuff and manifestation and things like that, there's also a lot of things that we're going to be talking about that are just very useful for having more control over your emotions, having this greater insight into how to live a happy life, I think. So if you are a woo-woo skeptic, I would try to keep an open mind, and we'll try to kind of steer it, in a way where even the non-woo-woo person will be able to get some good value out of it. So, welcome to the podcast, Ryan. How you doing, man?
Thanks for having me. Doing good.
Oh, excellent. So first, just talk a little bit about, how did you end up in Bali? What made you choose to come to Bali in the first place?
It's funny, actually. It wasn't really my choice. My partner is very good at manifesting things. And so, most of the time I'm sat there and I'm working on a video or something like that, some type of project, and she comes downstairs with a laptop and she shows me a location. And she says, Ryan, I want to go there. And I say, I don't say no straight away. No, I say maybe, but I have these projects coming up and I have to finish this one right now. And so ask me in like a couple of months. And so throughout the months, she'll be dropping little seeds in my head, like, oh, have you seen this beach? Have you seen this location? Yeah, this vegan spot here. And I think in some way, it starts to change my behavior slightly. And then I get things wrapped up faster. I start kind of habitually making plans to go to wherever it is that she's kind of suggesting. And then eventually we end up in her location of choice. And so this is her location of choice, the last one. The next one is Florida, so we'll probably end up there too. And I'm okay with it, because I get to travel the world. I think without her suggesting these places, I probably won't really be traveling that much, or wouldn't have been traveling that much. Work usually gets me out of the house. Clients will pay for me to go to their place and to coach them. And so usually it's the States, or it's pretty much spread out around the world. But that's like 2 trips a year. With her, it's like, I don't know, I lost count how many places we can go to within the year. And so that's what brought me to Bali. And I like it so far. It seems to be like a safe haven, getting us out of all of the conflict that's happening in the other areas of the world.
Yeah, and I think certainly in Bali, more than a lot of other places in the world, there's a very strong spirituality community, right? And it's like, I don't know of any other place in the world with more yoga teacher trainings or like, breathwork sessions and meditations and those kind of things. So have you found that it's a really good place for people who want to kind of explore that side of things?
Depends on where you're at and who you are. I had no idea that this place was going to be a hotspot for spiritual people and yoga places. It seems like everyone has their own business here. Me personally, I'm cut from a different cloth. I don't really get along with specific type of individuals, and I only found that out once I got here, that the spiritual community, they're different people. And it sounds really bad to say that, but I've noticed that there's a lot of behaviors that come to the surface within particular groups of individuals. And I've wanted to make a video on this for a while, but it'd probably get the most dislikes on my YouTube channel, although I did notice a few YouTubers also mentioning a lot of the personality traits of the people within the spiritual community and how they deal with themselves and why it is that they're actually into spirituality in the first place. A lot of the reasons don't really seem so healthy. But I noticed that there was a decent amount of, I guess, tension between me and other people. And it was very strange. It was very strange. I tried to get along with a lot of people. We still kept a lot of friends, but you know, when we got here, we ended up meeting a lot of individuals, and you have that weird awkwardness where you're trying to feel each other out. For example, I mentioned the safari park in front of said individuals. Didn't go down too well, obviously, because they were in a safari park and they kind of kept there against their will. But they were quite healthy animals, and they were muscly. They didn't look like they were starving. We have this image in our heads when we think about captivity. And I posted a video of me sitting on an elephant on my Facebook page, and I got so much hate. But I did make a video on that. I'm not the type of person who's just going to go to these places and take advantage of animals, because I really do care about animals too, which is why I went to the elephant park. I think they called it
the Mason Elephant Lodge?
Yeah.
Yeah, my girlfriend and I went there 3-4 weeks ago.
So you know
Yeah.
that they go crazy if you don't interact with them, because they've been rescued from, I think they call it Siberian. Is it Siberia? Siberian.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point that a lot of people don't consider, is that just because an animal's in captivity doesn't mean that they were like living a super healthy natural life in their natural habitat, right? Like in this case, in Mason Elephant Park, they were all rescued from a situation where they probably would have been killed from, at the time they were developing that area, the local humans were developing the area, and like their default was to kill the elephants,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, don't get me wrong, we didn't think, oh, elephants, that looks fun, and throw caution to the wind. Empathically, we considered their feelings, and it took us a while. Like I said earlier, we've been here for a year, and we only went like a couple of months ago. And so we went only because she told me that they were taken from Siberia, out of captivity, a place, like you said, where they would have died. And the whole park is like a retreat for elephants. It's made to try to rehabilitate their mind. And so if you don't ride them, they get depressed and they start to spiral, and you can see them. They're like moving backwards and forwards. They're trying to walk, but they're going nowhere. It's really weird. And they're short-staffed, and so they need the interaction from the public. But I posted that, and it didn't go down too well, and I just realized that, yeah, and there's a deeper side of all of it when it comes to psychology. And I think if I was to explain it in a video really well, people would understand, and a lot of people would also relate. For example, for those of your listeners out there, they've probably encountered the, I guess you can say, spiritual persona, whereby which a spiritual person would try to level up the person in front of them. So they'll say, well, I've been to this ayahuasca retreat, I've got how many scars on my arm from doing Kambo, and they probably have them on their back and stuff like that, or tattoos and stuff like that. And when a person's doing that, this is the first thing that I actually encountered whilst being in Bali, was these people that seem to be having these types of discussions.
It's like spiritual superiority is kind of a term that's been thrown around, right? And like, so like we're in Canggu right now, which is like the kind of like popular hip part of Bali, and people in Canggu make fun of the people in Ubud for this exact thing of, I am holier than thou. I am at a more enlightened level than you, which is kind of paradoxical, right? Because like if they actually were, then they wouldn't be like putting off this arrogance and that kind of odd vibe. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
That is exactly what I'm talking about. And there's a specific truth to their show of character, which is that they're not as spiritual as they portray themselves to be. They're still very much a normal person that has problems, flaws, and bad personality traits. And all that's happened is their ego shifted to one criteria, like a different theme, and it's just expressing itself through that theme. You'd have people that are very sexually aroused and not wearing much clothes. And then spirituality kind of became a thing, and those same people shifted over to spirituality and started wearing less clothes and did the same thing they did with the other trend. And so what's happening is they're not actually becoming spiritual, they're just using a different, I guess you could say, vice, a different way of expression. Well, it's the same expression, but just a different theme, which would be spirituality, to express their wants and their needs, which is coming from a very, what would you say, I would say unhealthy place. You understand that someone who's showing a lot of skin, they just want to attract a mate really desperately. And they've probably got it in their head that they can't do that for some reason. So there's a level of desperation there. They go about it in an unhealthy way when they're doing it a lot and they can't control it, and it becomes habitual. And then they end up in a relationship and yet they're still doing it. And then they're wondering as to why all these guys are looking at them. The boyfriend is now like mad, and the girl doesn't want to stop. And she has all these belief systems that says as to why she should keep doing what it is that she's doing. Usually, if the guy just calms down, because usually the guy freaks out at this point and they break up. But usually, if the guy calms down, the woman in the relationship will figure it out for herself. The guy doesn't have to do anything. They'll figure out what's happening. I mean, it's the same thing with guys in spiritual relationships. They have to realize that they're in a relationship now and they need to stop looking for other people. And so it's hard to stop looking for other people when you're in a community where there's a lot of, show about the curves, and there's a lot of show of flesh and stuff like that. And so it's just one of those things. It's like a really hard adjustment.
Yeah, and it's an interesting trend that's going on in the world, right? Where the spiritual practices are just gaining a lot more popularity. Meditation, there's big like 8 and 9 figure companies based around meditation and stuff like that, and softwares and these like tech devices that are supposedly will help your spiritual practices and all these things. And it's kind of an unprecedented time in history, I think, where it's reaching a level of popularity that can almost undermine the real upside effects of a lot of these spiritual practices, right? So like if there is all these large spiritual communities and these large companies behind everything, it kind of dilutes the motivations for what you're doing in spirituality. And like I think kind of a byproduct of that is some of the people in these communities projecting that kind of odd energy that's almost paradoxical with these spiritual practices. And I get that feeling a lot in Ubud where I am being judged for not being as spiritual as the other people around in this spiritual group, which is such an opposite kind of feeling as I would expect from some kind of actual spiritual gathering. You know what I mean? So like, what do you think about? Do you think there's upsides and downsides to the whole spirituality popularity growth around the world right now?
I mean, the downsides far outweigh the upsides. I think it's marketing. I mean, it's marketing. At the end of the day, people making those head devices that shift you into theta. Magazines have changed drastically to accommodate this new trend that people are really falling into. And the trend is being marketed towards people who want specific things out of the world. People go to yoga not because they want to be flexible. They go to yoga because they want to hook up with someone. Let's just be honest. Otherwise, they wouldn't dress a particular way. They wouldn't be chatting to everyone. Most people, I've gone to these groups and it really did upset me. I went to these yoga places. And most people, it's like a dating, what would you call it? It's one of those environments where everyone goes to hook up with each other. And it's not because they want to be healthy, not really. You want to look at the main drivers to why people do what it is that they're doing. And people want to get into spirituality not because they want to become enlightened or spiritual, they want to levitate or go to the 5th dimension. They want to get into spirituality because they want to hook up with someone else. And it's easier now because I was actually talking about this to someone recently. The new template of dating within the spiritual community is different in that it's easier to pick someone up in the dating arena if you have less muscles. I'll put it that way. Like, if you're skinnier, flexible, have more hair, walk barefoot, have a different name because some yogi gave it to you. Basically, what some people would say in the other, I guess you'd say, paradigm or way of thinking or way of being before spirituality became a trend, this type of person would have been seen as a weaker beta male, right? But now that beta male's become an alpha because of his stature, how he looks, or things that he's into. Maybe he's more feminine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So those people figure it out, and they might not figure it out consciously, but I've seen them, and I can tell what they're. I can see what they're about, and I can see why it is that they do things. And I'm not saying that it's bad. I mean, hey, that's awesome. They're given a chance. Like, people are given a chance to, you know, meet other people that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to meet in a different societal construct. You know, before you had to be jacked, you had to be manly, you had to have a beard, you had to be hard and mean towards women, somewhat cold, feeling-wise, and you need to have a group of friends that are also manly, and you need to be a manly person, so you need to be able to use your hands, you know, and like I said, you have to be kind of a douche to women, and those people in a nightclub setting would win. They would be considered the alpha, and they're not necessarily alphas. They're actually, I don't know if you would say beta, but
Like psychologically compensating in some way, would you say?
they're pushovers. Like, a real alpha doesn't push over the people within their environment. They make everyone feel loved and taken care of, and they are strong as well. They can take care of themselves and other people. The perfect example of an actual alpha male is Chris Hemsworth, Thor. If you look at how he behaves off camera, he's perfect. The dude's great. But then you do have these people within that old kind of societal construct where they try to play alpha, and that's when you get a lot of aggression, you get a lot of fights, people challenging each other and having fights with each other. You don't have that anymore in the spiritual community, really. You might have other competitions going on to try to prove who's the most spiritual, manly-wise, maybe who's went to the most masculine retreats, or, I mean, I heard that there was a retreat going on where people would speak about their feelings. It was just a man thing, and I couldn't help but notice. And again, I'm okay with these ideas, but I couldn't help but notice that when these ideas are presented to me by these individuals, that there's definitely an ulterior motive there. You know, like, they're going for other
Right.
reasons than.
Yeah, and that's so interesting. Like, that's probably in human history a new phenomenon, right? Like, traditionally, like, monks and they're very small, secluded communities that weren't attractive from like, I want to go date some hot woman perspective, because monks were not surrounded by any women. They just locked themselves with a bunch of dudes. So in a way, that kept the intention of their practices very pure, right? Whereas, I mean, I think there's some good things about the spirituality community too, but definitely I think one of the downsides is I have noticed the same thing you're talking about, where it now becomes the way to get women and get social status,
Yep.
to be the most spiritual guy walking around, you know, and to me that just has like a weird feeling. Like, I don't know how else to explain it other than just like kind of like the icky feeling you get when someone's not being genuine with you. I get that feeling around a lot of those guys, and women too.
Yeah, and you can't hide it. It's weird. I think people who are also of that vibration and intention, they allow it. You know, they allow it to happen. If someone else is like that in front of them, they're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna allow this behavior because I'm also doing it. I'm also kind of looking for it too. And maybe we should go on a date after this. They'll say, you know, and they'll probably spot out some places to go, like vegan places.
Yeah, and that's like, I think it's important to acknowledge that that's just a driving factor for humans, right? Like, I showed up, well, I was talking with my girlfriend about this. She was a stretching instructor for many years, and she definitely noticed, like, her female clients, when there was a class of all girls, a lot of these girls would be, like, not pushing it. They would, like, give up very quickly and just be complaining because it's painful, right? It's a painful thing to do. But if there's even one attractive guy in the group, then all of a sudden they're just like focused, they're pushing, they're like, you know, they're not complaining. they're doing it, right? So like it's real. And I notice this even in myself in the gym. Like I have a girlfriend and like very, very happily in a monogamous relationship, but just the fact that there are other women around, there's just like something about that I'm not going to be that guy who just like doesn't, like wimps out or just like goes on his phone in the corner or something like that, because there's the social pressure of having that around. So I think it's important to acknowledge it's a human trait, but also important to distinguish your intention with something like your spiritual practices. Is it really because you want to gain better emotional control, you want to like go after those kind of benefits, or do you just want to boost your ego and get laid, right?
And like I said, I'm okay with the primal urges of the body. I completely understand. But when you're lying to a group of people, when you've entered into a classroom and you're portraying yourself to be a particular way, it's uncomfortable for those who can sense it, And I can't imagine it being healthy to a person, because if you're being deceitful, if you're hiding your intentions, if you're doing stuff like that, your frequency's off. And that's going to show up in the body some way or form, or in your behavior patterns some way or form, or it's going to show some shape or form. And it's also going to show up in your life, like your relationships, dramatically. Like you said, the women in the yoga class, right? Well, usually within about 3 or 4 months of being in a relationship, the real personality comes out. So let's say a guy's in there, likes one of the women, dates them. Now the guy thinks that person's going to be hardcore, very motivated, every day to do yoga. 3 months go by, nah, she's on the couch watching TV. Like, it's just like her personality. And so when you lie, there are consequences to it. You're marketing yourself to be a particular type of way, which you cannot sustain long term. And so just be authentic. And if you really want to change who you are to be better, then you have to change yourself. If you want to do yoga in order to become flexible, change your motive, change your motives. Don't go for just women. Actually think about your body and think, okay, my hip's kind of messed up. I might actually have to work on that. Then work on it by yourself in your room for about 5 months or 6 months, just to test yourself. And then if you feel comfortable, do it at a yoga place, But don't lose sight of your goal. It's health. It's not women, and that's only if you want to change your motive. If you want women, then fine, but just don't lie about it, because it's weird.
Yeah, and people can sense that too. I think you're probably on the very higher end of, being able to sense those kind of energies and everything. But I mean, if you're a guy, you better believe that most women can sense that a lot more than you think. Yep. And so if you're being fake and not really authentic, you're trying to mask your emotions and trying to come off as someone that you're not, most women can sense that, right? And like the type of woman that you're probably going to end up with is probably not actually the type of woman that you really want to end up with. But that's a good segue over to manifestation, which is something that you talk about a lot. And first, I'd kind of like to hear, how would you explain manifestation to a skeptic, right? Someone who's not fully drinking the Kool-Aid of manifestation.
That's great, because I was kind of a skeptic too. I found it really hard to conceptualize ideas that seem very woo-woo and out there. Meaning they're so far out there I can't conceive or even see where they are. I can't make sense out of them. And so, but I consider myself a healthy skeptic in that I might not understand how something is done back then, but I'm still open to something or a host of experiences changing my mind. That definitely happened. I got a lot of experiences changing my mind, and only later into the years of, I guess you could say, my progression with manifestation, till I finally got it, did I realize how logical and how down to earth the practice was. It's very, very logical, and it's heavily involved with psychology. Be that if you tell yourself, or even better put, if you make a decision, your subconscious mind changes. Not you. I call like you and me, like what we're talking with here, ordinary awareness. There's a part of our psyche that's listening to everything we're saying, that is aware of everything around me and around you, and it's constantly on high alert. It's absorbing information. It doesn't turn off when you become an adult. It stays on, like very switched on. It's like having a person inside your head that's on cocaine. And so when you make a decision, either mentally or verbally, it hears everything you're saying. It also pays attention to your level of belief. And this isn't woo, this is very logical. In that if you don't believe it, it's going to be like, oh, okay, he's probably not going to put much effort into this new endeavor, so I'm not even going to try. And what your subconscious mind tries to do is change your behavioral patterns. And so if you say to yourself, I'm gonna gain a little bit of muscle within the next 2 weeks to a month, it's very believable. A part of you's like, oh yeah, I agree with him, yeah, we can do that. And then it will start changing your eating habits, it will change your exercise regime, and to you, it will just feel like you're just getting the odd spur of the moment idea to make little adjustments to things, but really it's coming from your subconscious mind that's working with you. And eventually you'll gain that muscle, usually quicker than you think, because your mind is very intelligent. It knows exactly what to do. It knows what, it's actually freakishly weird in the sense that it knows how to make you behave. It can make you stand a certain way and say certain things to get a desired result, desired outcome. And there's nothing's off limits. You can do anything. And that's crazy to think of, especially if you think of it in terms of woo-woo, because you can do anything. But if you think of it psychologically, you've encountered so many people that have been successful. Even if you never left your house, you've just been watching TV, you've seen successful people. So you know how they act, you know how they think, you know how they speak, you know how they walk, and you've internalized it. And if you're in your 20s, you've been doing this for 20 years. Same thing with music. If all you've done is listen to really good music and really bad music, you know the difference between good music and bad music. So you have within you the ability to become famous and become a musician to the level or to a greater level than Michael Jackson or someone that you see as being very good at music. Like, it's inside your mind. It's just lying there because you just take it all in. If you believe that you can't sing, your mind, that part of you that can show you how to sing or show you what lyrics to write, because you can also write music. You listen to so many songs. Like, you know how to write music. If you don't believe you can, though, you won't get the ideas. That part of you that's in control of that system is holding them and just not letting go because you're saying that you can't do it. But if you think to yourself, maybe I can write a good song, and it's like, and it throws to you a little idea, and you get a lyric in your head, like, oh, that sounds pretty good. And during the process, like, that doesn't sound good, so you should take it out and try again. Try a different lyric. But most people, they've been kind of conditioned and trained into a state where if they fail or if it seems like it's going wrong, then they should just give up and quit. So, oh, that lyric doesn't sound good. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Who put that in your head? It's like you've seen someone say that, and so now you think that you should say that when something goes wrong, instead of realizing that it's a process where you try things out until eventually you come up with a masterpiece. Right? And you can do that very easily if you're open to this information that's inside you. So you can do it with weight, you can do it with music, you can do it with making money, you can be very successful. You can make $1 million a year, you can make 100,000, you can make 1,000 a day. It's all based on your belief system. There's a lot on making money that a lot of people don't really want to pay attention to, I don't think, because they're very much attached to their personality. You know, like their personality basically defines their income. If they have some type of money blockage, or usually it's a whole host of money blockages, so perceptions around money that make them feel uncomfortable, then they won't make 1,000 a day or 100,000 a month or something like that. They'll make probably 1,000 a month or 500 pounds or whatever it is based on how they're thinking. And so that's when you get into vibration. How you think changes your state of being. As soon as you get an idea to make money, you get excited, right? So when you get excited, you get a whole host of ideas flooding inside of your brain. Don't drop those ideas, write them down, you know, and act on them when you can. Because those ideas are coming from a special part of you that's saying, this idea could make you this amount of money. Because I've seen it work. in the past. I've seen through your eyes certain people making this amount of money doing these same things, so do it and see what happens, you know. And so it's like vibration. If you kind of throw out the word vibration, because when you think vibration, you think of something that's mechanical, something that's moving, and it kind of takes away from putting the focus on a state of being. A state of being is literally feelings mixed with different thoughts, and also, you know, how you feel physically, because you have emotional feelings, you have a physical state of being, and you have your mental thoughts that you have throughout the day. Your mental thoughts dictate how you feel emotionally, and how you feel emotionally dictates how you feel physically. So that will determine how much movement you put into a practice. If you're dancing and you're really up for dancing, you'll have really good thoughts, you know, you'll have a high quality level of thoughts. You'll say, everyone's looking at me, everyone likes this, I'm able to make this person dance, this person's able to make me dance like this, so then you want to dance even more. Your body's moving and playing off of your emotional state, which is playing off of your mental state. And so state of being is very important, and realizing that you have a lot of information in your head is huge. I'd say for anyone who wants to manifest, work on getting rid of your limiting beliefs, which are often adopted by your peer group, but mainly the people in your home, so your family first. You take on their kind of poison, psychological poison. They determine for you what you can or cannot do over time. In the beginning you think you can do anything, but then eventually you start to think, nah, maybe I can't do that. You know, I remember when I was a kid, I said I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to fly planes. Everyone was all for it, but then I said the same thing consistently for not every single day, but maybe a couple of years will go by. I'd say the same thing to my mom or to my friends, and they'd say, yeah, you can do that. But then I noticed there was a specific age that I hit when all of a sudden their reaction changed, and it wasn't, oh, you can do anything. It was, oh, I wouldn't get in a plane with you if you paid me X amount of money. You know, and it completely changed. My mom, her demeanor shifted and said, oh, maybe you should work in retail, because you can definitely do that. You know, and I was like, what happened to me being limitless? Now you're telling me what I can't do. And it shifted, and it would put, well, with anyone, it would put the idea in their head that they can't do what they want, they can't live up to their dreams, their own expectations. With me, I was a little bit more stubborn, you know, but I have a twin brother, and he perceived all this information very differently, and so he's in a job that has a specific wage that isn't very large. I mean, it's okay for some people in the UK. For me, it's not okay, and so yeah, and it's hard to try to convince someone. It's hard to convince someone to step outside of their own box and to see themselves being worth more than what they've been convinced of, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that's such a beautiful way to explain that. And I think that the default kind of human way of looking at things psychologically is, I'll believe it when I see it, right? And it's one of the trickier things to really believe it before you can see any evidence of it, because that's the best way to go about it. You know, maybe you can do it in reverse, but it's much more difficult to do it that way, right? I think there's a big reason why winners keep on winning is because they've done it before. They have the belief that they can keep on winning. But how did they win the first time, right? Do you think that they just like didn't believe in themselves, like, oh, no way I can do it, and oh, what, I actually did it, wow, I didn't expect that. It's like, probably not. Like you read the biographies of guys like Michael Jordan, for example, one of the greatest athletes of all time. He knew he was going to be the best. You know, he just had this crazy confidence about him, even during his like college basketball years and everything like that. Like he just one of the most powerful manifestors. Like he knows the ball is going in the basket before the ball leaves his hands. You know, like just that pure confidence and visualization. And you could argue that you need to see the evidence before you can really believe that, but that's not necessarily true, is it?
That's fair. People are afraid of failing, and so they want to see someone else do it first, because then they're gonna put effort into it. Otherwise, it's not worth their effort and time. You know, they want absolute certainty, otherwise there's no point in trying. And the reality is that's not how life works. Nothing works like that. It starts off with your imagination, then you do it. The chair you're in started off with someone thinking about it, then they made it. I actually had to do this myself to get myself out of that belief system, because I had many of the blockages too, manifestation blockages. And the way I did it was, I said, okay, mind, let's see if I can prove you wrong. Let's say I want to draw something on this piece of paper, something that's never been drawn before. I haven't seen someone do it before. I might have my reservations, you know, regarding whether or not I can do it, but let's see if I can do it anyway. So I imagine it, and then I draw it. I'm like, oh, that's very close. Oh, so you can pretty much do it without having seen it being done first. You can draw something out of your imagination. So I was like, okay, well, that's okay, but what about this? This is different. You know, I want you to draw this. It's a little harder. And so the mind is like that. It's like proof isn't enough. Like 1 ounce of proof isn't enough, because you're effectively trying to change someone's state and convince them to put a lot of energy and effort into something that they otherwise wouldn't usually do. So it's like a convincing game. And so then I was like, okay, let's draw this character. And I imagined them, and I drew it. And I was like, okay, well, that's like 98% accuracy. And then I got 100% accuracy. I was like, okay, clearly there's something going on here. And then I thought about my life. I'm very artistic. I make things with my hands. And so a lot of it is imagination first, and then reality. Just kind of figure out that you can apply that same drawing, analogy, that metaphor to everything in life. Not just creating a piece of furniture, but also creating yourself, your personality, its form of expression, its art at the end of the day. You're imagining yourself being a particular way anyway, but then you often end up bringing that forward. For example, let's say you're about to walk into a public setting, and you're like, oh, those people aren't going to like me, they're going to think I'm weird, they're going to think I smell funky. What's going on there is you've just thought about 4 different memories of times when people didn't like you and you smelled funky. And so your mind takes your past, a memory of your past, and uses that to try to predict how you're going to be within this now moment or within the future. So it tries to predict the future based on knowns within your past. But the reality is those moments within your past were just fleeting moments. They started and then they stopped. You don't smell the same every single day. And if you do notice that you smell funky, you should take a shower first, because then you will avoid that situation. But most people who have given up and subscribe to the idea that they're going to put people off won't even try to take care of their personal hygiene, because that's not in alignment with their vision of failing. And so they'll start to self-sabotage. And so, I mean, it's pretty terrible. There are a few ways to stop yourself from being socially awkward too in front of those situations. Most people have social anxiety. You can, first off, before you go into that environment, you can notice as to how you're screwing yourself up by looking at examples within your past where you've been socially awkward and identifying with that. And you're like, oh, okay, I can see it happening in the moment. I'm unconsciously manifesting. Great, let's change this completely. So you would imagine yourself walking in there with confidence and everyone liking you, and you're making them feel comfortable, right? What happens is your mind can't tell the difference between your imagination, what you're creating out of thin air, and a past event, a past memory. So a part of your subconscious mind thinks that you're actually confident and that you're actually good at speaking. And then you go into the room after imagining this, you'll notice your behavior shifts. People like you a little bit more. And the thing is most people identify with the memory of their past, but what they should be identifying with is the thing that's changing all the time. It's changing its behaviors, because that's what you actually are, and your behaviors are learned. Like I said earlier, you're copying them from people, because it makes sense to. It makes sense to be, let's say, aggressive if you grew up in a household where all you saw was the male figures in your family being aggressive under certain situations, under certain circumstances. And so when you're placed in those same circumstances, now you act aggressive. That's not you, that's not your behavior, you're copying someone else from your past. It's just people do it for so long that it becomes a habit, and then they start to identify with it. And then the worst thing is other people start to associate that person as being a violent person. That's not them. So now you get judged based off of how you've been impressioned, which is very unfair, because every person who's alive right now and who has ever existed is really a blank canvas, and they're just kind of operating out of a specific model. And so you can change the model, and you'll start to change your relationships and everything. and your whole awareness opens up too as to how you can do that. Like there are so many other ways, going back to the yoga thing, of attracting women that will actually be of your vibration and that will actually be intimate with you, other than trying to do it in a way that's marketed to you by society. It's like, hey, don't do what you feel like you should be doing. Don't do what feels right. Do this instead. It's more shiny. It looks like it's getting more results for other people, you know, because you're seeing all of those backsides bending over in let's say downward dog and stuff like that. People are focusing on materialism. They're focusing on the image of it and thinking that that's the way forward, instead of going from in to out. If you were to sit with yourself and think, okay, I want to manifest a partner that's exactly like me, and I'm going to do it the way that I want to do it, not the way that the world says it has to be done. You might find yourself being more you, going to more of the places that you like to go to, like gyms, and not for those reasons, of course, like attracting a mate. I guess that way of attracting people has been marketed heavily as well. So let's use a different example. Maybe you'll go to the library more because you're actually the type of person who likes to read. Or maybe you'll spend a little bit longer at a cafe, like it's a Starbucks, because that's what you generally do anyway. What's happening is you're making the connection. You're making that connection, which is by you being yourself and putting out that frequency, you're going to be putting yourself in a similar environment to another version of yourself in that way, like another person that's also going to be like you. And then is the easiest, here's the best part about all of this. It's really easy to speak to someone that's like you. Like super easy. There's no awkwardness. There's no, oh crap, what if I say this and they judge me? You're not thinking about being judged if they're like you. You're thinking, oh, they're into the same thing I'm into. Cool. And then you're like, I mean, your conversation can go into so many different areas, but there's no fear of judgment because they're like you. And most of the time, guys do this by accident, and they end up friend zoning the people that are right for them because they're in that cafe and the person speaks to them, having a conversation, and then, okay, that person's my friend, and I don't see them as my partner because I didn't attract her in these other ways that have been kind of marketed to me. And so I guess they're not for me because I'm supposed to get a woman at a nightclub or a yoga retreat or an ayahuasca retreat, which is the new one.
Yeah,
So,
met at an ayahuasca retreat. Yeah, we're sharing the same puke bucket next to each other.
yeah, and so I mean, I try not to get worked up about all of this. I've done a very good job. When I first was here, it really messed me up for like 4 months straight. I went dark, super dark, and it messed with my personality. I had to change something because I was like, I can't be like this and work. I couldn't be like that and work because it was ruining my relationships with people that I was meeting. Like, oh man, I went to a, what you call it? It's not a retreat, but it was a ceremony. It was a plant medicine ceremony. They were using THC, so weed oil, cannabis oil. And I was in the thick of it. I really was fed up. I was fed up with all of it. The whole charade. I was tired of it. I was exhausted. And I was sat there and I didn't make eye contact with anyone. I was so rude. And it was horrible. Rude. And I was like, I don't want to do that ever again. My partner brought it up to me and she was like, you're really rude, and I apologized. And then I worked on, okay, the main issue. What's the problem here? Well, I have a problem with people being fake and trying to deceive people. That's the problem. So I had to be okay with that, which was weird. It sounds crazy, right? You have to be okay with what you're saying. But the way I fixed it was I had to see it from their perspective. I mentioned earlier that everyone has needs and they've just gotten the wrong idea as to how they're getting or going about their needs. It's perfectly acceptable to attract a mate and stuff like that and to do these things. When I see it in a different light, in that they've been manipulated, or at least they've just gotten the wrong idea or misunderstood something, or that they've had a string of bad days, and so vibrationally they're pretty upset anyway, and when you're upset you get miserable and angry and all these other emotions come up. Out of that predisposition you end up making choices that aren't so healthy, like deception and stuff like that. And so when you look at it like, okay, they're just damaged, and well, really, okay,
maybe if they weren't so damaged, they would be better people. And really, it's not really a choice. It's not a choice for them. If anything, they're, I would say, impartial victims to their circumstance. Like, a large part of them isn't aware of what they're doing. A large part of them isn't aware of how to navigate their emotional expression, how they are. A large part of them are healing. And so, of course, when you get a lot of people that are healing within the spiritual community, you get people that are very agitated, angry, upset, all within the same space. And their behaviors are going to seem off at times, but it's perfectly understandable. Like, you can get it. And when you get it, you no longer have a problem with it, And then your behaviors change so that you don't end up mixing with that group, because otherwise, because this happened as well, their problems become your problems. Their superiority complex becomes your superiority complex. Even if you have no reason to do that, they'll convince you that you need to do it, because you'll feel insecure around them now, because they've said 101 things that make them feel better than you, and they're basically convincing you that you're less than them. And so now you feel like you need to boost your self-esteem, and now you've been pulled into it. And so
yeah, that's a really tough one, because I think there's a lot of benefit to these spiritual practices for healing and everything like that. But like you said, we're sensitive beings, right? If we're surrounding ourselves too much or immersing ourselves too much in that whole healing process of other people, there's kind of like that tribe mentality of like, oh, I also need to be vulnerable. I also need to kind of like share all this crazy stuff, or maybe I'm also a victim of this thing this person's struggling with. It can be very heavy surrounding yourself with that too much. And I've definitely noticed myself, I don't go to as many of these kind of spiritual events anymore, because I find myself questioning my own life and happiness a lot more, just because I'm surrounded by a lot of other people who are doing the same and going through their own healing process. So I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah, you end up having problems that you didn't have when you walked into the retreat, which is horrible. Then you try to heal those because you're convinced that they're your problems. It's so bad. But I think, having podcasts like this and having people who openly speak out about it will shine a light on this aspect of people's behaviors. And then maybe people will start thinking about whether or not they should go to retreats long term. Short term, yeah, but I'm an advocate of small gatherings or just single gatherings, doing it by yourself, And then maybe everyone else will start to change the behavior, but usually people need motive to change the behavior. Like, it needs to be greater than their motives to procreate, which is hard, so hard.
True. That's a tough one to overcome there. Well, Ryan, we're at the end of our time here for the podcast. It's been really, really interesting, the places that we went on this podcast here. But if people want to learn more about what you do and maybe see some of your content that you put out there on these kind of topics, where's the best place for them to do that?
Ryan Cropper, the YouTube channel. Best place, has pretty much all of them, other than courses. There's a ton of information on there.
Yeah, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes, guys. I've consumed a bunch of Ryan's content. It's great. I've got some of his courses as well. Very helpful things. So definitely recommend checking that out. That'll be at the show notes, dannycarlson.co. And thank you so much for coming on here, man. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's been fun. Thanks for having me.
Boom. Awesome, man.
Boom. I started a ton, but...
For show notes and resources mentioned in this episode, visit kenjiroi.com.